Okay, so today's learning objective is to understand and use proportions as qualitative ratios. That's a very kind of obscure sounding learning objective, and it's actually kind of pulled straight from the specification. A lot of these actually learning objectives are, but kind of this is actually a specific point in the specification, and so I'm not. It's a bit kind of hard to know what this means, and it's a bit kind of hard to even explain what it means. The best way you can see what it means is through questions, but as a brief outline, this is basically it's kind of the intuition I guess behind this is that it's saying that for example the best way I think of describing is actually to give an example is say if you have a recipe, right, and you use certain ingredients to cook for 5 people, you'd have to double that kind of thing, double those proportions to cook for 10 people, for example. So if say kind of you have to use let's say 100 grams of butter, for example, butter for say 5 cookies, for example. If you were to bake 10 cookies, that's kind of that'd be 200 grams of butter. And kind of what's saying is that since the proportion of kind of butter to the butter to cookie ratio is basically the same in these two cases, because if you simplify kind of both of these, you'd get to the same outcome. What you're looking at is you're looking at butter per cookie. And since butter per cookie in both of these cases is the same, you then say kind of the ratios are equal, so i.e. the quality of ratios. So kind of if you have the same proportion within the ratio, so say for example if you have perhaps a bit of a more easier example, which we've kind of talked about a lot. If you have say 1 red ball for every two blue balls, right? This is a ratio of kind of 1 to 2, right? But let's say there were actually 100 red balls and 200 blue balls. Well, that's a ratio of 100 to 200. But since the proportion is the same, these two ratios are basically the same. And in fact, we can simplify this 100 to 200 ratio by going 1 to 2, right? If we divide both sides by 100. So that's why this is saying since the proportion is the same, i.e. we can simplify to this. If we can simplify from 100 to 200 that ratio into this, they're basically the same thing. And you just kind of, I guess you have understanding that we've actually implicitly assumed that whenever we kind of divide both sides by the same amount, and I think kind of that's you intuitively understand why you can do that. But this is just an explicit thing in the specifications. So it's worthwhile going over. The questions that I guess are most closely related to this is to doing with questions like these, the recipe question. So a recipe for a flapjack uses a recipe for 8 flapjack uses 136 grams of oats, 156 grams of peanut of butter, and 120 grams of honey. How much of each ingredient is needed to make 6 flapjacks? And again, so what we have is that we have the ratio of oats to butter to honey to flapjacks. We have this, right? And what we know is if we kind of simplify this in some manner, we have like the equal ratio. If we have 6 flapjacks to whatever this to whatever that, right? We have kind of this ratio is equal to this ratio, and basically we want to maintain this ratio, right? But just have this number equal to 6, because we have 6 flapjacks. We're also seeing what's the ratio when we have 6 here instead of 8. And basically, as we said, we want to keep kind of this needs to be true, right, to go from this to this. So we kind of just have to change each in the same amount. So if we've gone from 8 to 6, right, what we've done is that we've times 8 by 8 times by 6 over 8 is equal to 6. So since we've timed this number by 6 over 8, we have to times all of these numbers by 6 over 8. That's kind of all there is to it. So if if we're going from this to this, just think about what goes from here to here and apply that to each of those. So 120 times by 8, 120 times by 6 by 8. 6 by 8 is 3/4 actually. So 120 times by 3/4 is what is that? 120 divided by 4 is 30, and so 90. 156 times by 3/4. This can be quicker on the calculator. 117, and 136 times by 3 is 4 is 102. And there's our answer. So and this is kind of sorry, I don't know why I wrote 60. So this is kind of the mathematical way of thinking of it. If you kind of think of this in the real world context, like I'm sure there's actually a chance you had to do this in real life. When the recipe is given for 2 people and you need to cook for 4, for example. So all you have to do is if for 8 flapjacks, if you have this kind of stuff, what you can think is say for 1 flapjack you need 136 by 8, this divided by 8, this divided by 8, and then think, oh, for 1 flapjack you need this. I'm making 6. You do times that by 6. And there's all that kind of is there to it. So again, quick recap. You think about how to get from this number to the number you need. Think about what you multiply by, what fraction you multiply that by, or kind of what number perhaps. It could be if you want to go from 8 to 16, right? If we were doubling the recipe, we times by 2. But in this case, just think about what fraction or kind of what number you multiply to get from that number you have to the number you need, and apply that same to all of the other numbers. And we've got that here. You'd list this out. You say 102 grams of oats, 117 grams of butter, and so forth. So you just kind of list those out. And then we've got kind of question number 2 here, just as another worked example. There are 4 grams of fiber in every 100 grams of bread. A loaf of bread weighs 420 grams, excluding the packaging, and contains 12 equal slices. How much fiber is in one slice of bread? Okay, so we have the ratio we're giving is fiber to weight ratio, right? That's what we're given. And at the end of the day, that's what we need to calculate, but just for a different weight. So we were given a 4 to 100 ratio, right, for fiber to weight. But now we're asked to calculate, in a slice of bread. So whatever the weight of a slice of bread is, and we're asked to calculate what the fiber ratio is. So let's figure out what the weight of a slice of bread is. So we have 420 grams is the total loaf of bread, and there's 12 equal slices, so 420 divided by 12. So we'd say weight of loaf is equal to 420 divided by 12. 42 by 12 is, that doesn't go to 12, does it? So 420 divided by 12 is 35, so 35 grams. So we have the ratio 4 to 100, and we need something, whatever number is here, to 35, which is a slice of bread. So how do we get from 100 to 35? Well, we times by 35 over 100, right? So when we do 4, so if you want to go from 4 to, whatever number is here, we times by 35 by 100. 4 times by 35 divided by 100, which, from our calculator, 4 times by 35 divided by 100 is 1.4. So the answer is, for every 35 grams of loaf of bread, for every 35 grams of bread, there's 1.4 grams of fiber, i.e. for every slice of bread, there's 1.4 grams of fiber. So our answer is 1.4 grams of fiber per loaf of bread. And that's kind of all there is to it. So again, quick recap, if we have a ratio like this, we want to get to a ratio kind of with one of the numbers changed. That's how these questions work, right? You have a ratio of, say, x to y, and somehow you multiply one of these numbers to get another number. So you say, if you want to get to half y, all you have to do is figure out how to get from the number you have to the number you want, and apply that to this the other side. And that's all there is to it. So hopefully that all made sense, and I'll see you guys in the next video.